In this demo, we are going to use Red Hat API Designer to create a simple API definition using the OpenAPI specification. The idea behind using the API Designer is to simplify the process of designing an API to be suitable for our Citizen Integrator. So let's start by clicking the New API button, and you get a choice whether to use version 2 or 3 of the specification. For this demo, I'm sticking with version 3. We are now in the main screen to design your APIs. As I mentioned, the API Designer is a graphical, form-based API editor, so it allows you to easily craft APIs with zero coding, and without even having to master all the details of the OpenAPI specification. Let's start by giving our API a name, and the idea behind this API revolves around a location data. So imagine that a location is stored in your database, or a list of locations are stored in your database, and we want to create the APIs around the CRUD operations for those locations. So let's start by creating that data type. So in this step, we'll create a location data type, and one easy way to do that is to provide an example JSON file of your data type. So we can see that our location has an ID, that's an integer, it has a name. You can define a latitude and a longitude for that location, and it has a type, and it has a status. Once that is done, you can ask the API designer to generate all the REST operations around that data type. But for this step, I'm going to choose not to do that, just to show you how we can craft those operations ourselves. Now, once I clicked the Save button, the API designer has automatically detected the data types from the example we provided in our JSON format. And now we are ready to start defining the operation. So let's start by defining a get operation. So we'll create the path and add that. And from there, the API designer proposes the set of operations that you can create. We're going to start by creating a get operation that returns a list of all location records in our database. Now, note that the API designer validates your design in real time and provides a warning when there are missing elements in your design. So let's start by defining a response for our API, for our get operation. You can choose any code that suits your use case. In my case, I'm going to return a successful 200 OK code, and let's add the return payload. In my case, it's going to be a JSON type. You can choose any of those media types. I'm going to stick to JSON. And now we can start defining the type of our response body. Remember, we are returning a list of locations, so we are going to return an array of the data type location we just created. It's good practice to provide an example, and that comes really handy when you want to mock your API. So let's add an example here of how that can look like. Now notice the exclamation mark next to the description. So the designer highlights that we need to define a description. So let's just do that. Let's say that this API returns an array of location records. And you can continue to create the rest of the operations in the same manner. At this point, if you were using the rest of Red Hat's integration stack, you could generate a Fuse Camel project for the API you've just defined. and start implementing your integration logic using that API. Or you could export that as a JSON or a YAML file and use that in an external tool, use the definition you created in an external tool. Now, another way we could have done this is the auto-generate feature that I just mentioned. So if we do the exact same thing one more time and provide our JSON example over here, and this time I'm going to ask the API designer to generate all the operations around my data type. You'll note that the API designer has created all the operations for the data type that we just created. So operations to get a list of all locations, create a new location, or get a location by ID, update a location, and obviously delete a location. So what's left for you now is to tailor this according to your needs, like modifying responses or descriptions or what have you. Uh, Note that if you click the source tab, uh, you'll find that we have created both a YAML and JSON schema for our APIs. Finally, we can also import definitions into the API designer and proceed with editing the design, uh, assuming that another team has created that API, for example. Normally, the next step in the API lifecycle process would be to create a mock API. And for that purpose, Red Hat provides a tool called Microx, which complements the API designer nicely. This concludes our demo around the basic functionalities of the API designer.